Everyone by now knows that Pita's sword is a masterful and destructive weapon in the Lords of the Fallen, but what is better is doing the one thing that Pita herself couldn't do, and dual wield the sword with another absolutely monstrous weapon and truly ascend to the next level. And you can do all of that pretty much at the start of the game. I will show you how to do that today. You'll go from this to this. This build is a million times better than just using Pita's sword on itself. This is my Lightreaper build, but it's actually better than the guy that you meet at the tutorial with the same name in the game. Probably one of the most broken builds in Lords of the Fallen, and that is not an exaggerated statement. Wielding these in conjunction just destroys everything. Whether you're just progressing and destroying all the mobs surrounding you, or the harder difficulty enemies, or the bosses, everything. These two swords have an insane reach, and the dual wielding moveset is just really good and a fluid moveset, and when you dual wield them, well, it is game over for everything in the world of Lords of the Fallen. Like I said, you can make this build early on, but it's going to last for your entire playthrough and will only just get better and better as you upgrade your weapons, and based on my experience in late game, it will also carry you to victory right there. To stay spoiler free, however, I'm going to be mostly showing early game footage, and you can see from these early-ish game bosses that the sword decimate them. Look at these numbers. The build honestly might just be too powerful when you can erase bosses as quickly as this, but thankfully it is a lot of fun to do so. What I personally don't like about Pita's sword in itself is that its heavy charged attack is like a spear-esque type of piercing move. Now don't get me wrong, the light attacks of this weapon are really good, but the heavy attacks on the other hand are, yeah, it just doesn't feel powerful. It hits exactly 1 point of an enemy. However, if you pair it with the sword that I will talk about in a second, you actually get the Grand Sword heavy attack moveset for dual wielding. So now you have the best of both worlds. You still have the very fast R1s to slice through enemies like butter, but when you're fighting something that doesn't give you the time to swing your swords and instead you just want to instantly one-shot it or just deal massive damage in one go, you can do that now as well. The most annoying enemies in the game have a lot of HP, and having the ability to just heavy charge them with a nuclear move and pretty much one or two shot them feels just too good. The annoying Grim Reapers in the game, one-shot them. Freaky fire guys, make really quick work of them. Now, aside from the moveset related power, dual wielding these swords in particular is very powerful due to their high radiant scaling as well as their status effect. So let's talk about that for a second. So the first weapon is going to be Pita's sword, but the second one is going to be the Bloody Glory. And the description of this sword is really deceptive because initially you would think it's a strength radiance based weapon, and it's simply a mismatch pairing it with Pita's sword, but it's actually just a radiance weapon with a strength requirement, and that's due to the fact that it scales terribly with strength and scales very well with radiance. So you really don't want to get any points into strength after meeting the requirement, which is perfect because Pita's sword on the other hand solely scales with radiance and does so extremely well. Both scaling with radiance means they're extremely good to dual wield, but the insane damage that you will get when dual wielding is just the start, because what's next up is truly the selling point of this build. Bloody Glory comes with a whopping 300 bleed per hit. 300. Let that sink in. And you can get this bad boy very early. If you don't know what bleed is in this game, well, it's pretty much OP in every game out there. When you proc bleed, it has an initial burst for extra damage, but also all your next physical attacks will deal increased damage. Then to complement that, Pita's sword on the other hand also comes with 100 smite. Now smite in this game is a status effect that when procced bursts down your enemy with an additional lightning bolt that does really good damage, but that is not all. It also gives you a buff that applies additional damage on any subsequent hit, delivering holy damage until the effect wears off. And obviously we are all about holy damage, as both of our swords have holy damage. So essentially our damage output is increased by two different sources within a few seconds, and then we also get that initial burst from the smite as well as the bleed. In other words, our damage output will spiral out of control with this build. And these being radiant scaling based weapons means they get a lot of power from the radiant imbuement spell as well, which scales off your radiance level. This spell is honestly one of the best things in the game. It will make you proc smite pretty much instantly and give you a lot of extra damage, and you can buy Bleed-Smite right at the start of the game, as well from the NPC at the main hub. The synergy between that spell and these swords is off the charts, and if you imbue both of them, you have something so deadly there are simply just no words for it. These weapons, for all intents and purposes solely scaling off Radiance, means that this is a Radiance based build, and the evolution of my Preacher of Death starting build from my Get Overpowered Early video, I would highly suggest you to watch that video if you just want more general tips on how to get better armor, upgrades to your healing flask, and more sustain oriented power-ups that will give you a better time if you just started the game. And it also goes over the Preacher of Death build, which is my Radiance build revolving around the Orient Preacher Hammer and early game Radiance spells. Now, don't get it twisted, that hammer is in itself already extremely powerful. It's just Thor's hammer, but yeah, you can always take things to the next level. The Lightreaper build is just in a different universe altogether. That's how powerful it is. Okay, now that we have discussed why these swords are so good, let's get into how to get them. And like I said, you can get both of them very early on, and I was not lying when I said that. Pita's sword is easy to obtain. You defeat Pita and can buy her sword from Malhu after you give him the Ball of Revelations, which you get in Pilgrim's Purge. Now, this sword costs around 40 Umbral Scouring, so I did the math, so you don't have to, and checked at which point in the game would be the earliest possible point to actually get that many Scourings when you just naturally progress, and I would say that it's around after you defeat the Congregator of Flesh, you'll have around 40 Scourings, because this guy in itself already gives 10, and if you make sure to soul flay all the stigmas up until that point, kill the bosses, and also buy the Scourings at Malhu, you will have around 40 Umbral Scouring. So you can get this sword very early on, and if you're going to buy stuff from this guy, make also sure to get that Blessed Reflections from Malhu. This spell is an absolute beast as well, especially early on. For Bloody Glory, you'll need to buy the Pilgrim's Purge key, which costs 9,500 of the runes in this game, but you can just farm that. I have a good farm in my other video as well if you're interested in that, and it's worth the investment. Trust me, the key unlocks several doors in the game, but we want to go to the Bellroom Vestige and open the door right there. You'll now end up in a late game zone, so definitely just move as fast as possible to our destination. Don't bother with the mobs or killing stuff, even though with how powerful this build is, you can definitely just kill them if you want to do so, but I would just recommend to essentially move forwards till you get to the outside, then move across this platform till you can go inside again. There will be a seed to plant there, which I do recommend, just so you don't have to do it all again if you die. There's also some nice fragments for upgrading your sword, by the way, right next to the seed if you destroy the boxes, so get those as well so you can upgrade your swords earlier. Then you want to climb the ladder and essentially just keep moving forwards. Don't go to the left area or you will trigger a boss fight, and the path is otherwise pretty linear. You will essentially ultimately get to the light, and the Bloody Glory will be laying around there for you to pick up. When you have gotten it, you can now go ahead and have a big party, because you have now two really powerful swords. I would recommend to go outside as well here quickly, pick 2 more launch fragments, and get the vestige for later. Now, regarding gear, armor, and that kind of stuff, if you're really early in the game, just use the gear and rings I proposed in my Get Overpowered Early video. They will give you plenty of extra sustain, which is really nice. However, if you already progressed a bit, I would instead recommend getting the Empyrean Pendant or use the Hallowed Triptych pendants. The first one increases your holy damage and holy defenses, and the second one raises your posture damage caused by holy damage. So you really can't go wrong with either option, and the choice is completely up to your preference. For rings, I would recommend mixing the Ring of Sanguine Might, which increases our posture damage versus targets that have proc bleed on, which again is going to happen really fast with that whopping 300 bleed on our Bloody Glory. And I would recommend the Orient Sorcerer's Ring for the other ring slot to make our holy damage even more bonkers. For stats, our most important stats are going to be Radiance, Vitality, and Endurance. Soft caps for Radiance in this game are 50 and 75, while for Vitality and your Stamina, the soft caps are going to be 40 and 60. So keep those in mind when leveling, and you really just want to have a good balance between investing in your offensive stat and your defensive stats. For runes, I would use the Devoth or Ahriman runes depending on your progression. The Ahriman runes give more scaling compared to the Devoth ones in Radiance at the expense of Inferno scaling, which is completely fine as we don't care about Inferno for this build. Regarding spells, I would recommend you to use the ones I already mentioned in this video, as well as considering early game Aura of Tenacity. This thing gives a huge defensive buff, which will make your survive ability a lot better. I also have another video coming up that revolves around the Radiant spells, but it contains more spoilers in terms of boss footage, so it's going to be a video of its own, and there's more to those spells than one initially might think, and I guess that is a huge bonus to this build as well. The fact you have 2 powerful swords that destroy everything isn't where the build ends. No, you can complement it with a bunch of useful spells as well. So stay tuned for that and subscribe to my channel to not miss out on it.